The temple bells were ringing when I materialized in the garden. It was the kind of sound that reached into your chest and made your heart beat in rhythm with something ancient, something that had been calling the faithful to prayer for 1,000 years. I steadied myself against a stone column, feeling the familiar disorientation of temporal displacement wash over me like cold water. The chrono module on my wrist pulsed softly, confirming what I already knew. I had arrived in Kyoto, Japan in the year 1185 in the final days of the Genpei War, when the world was soaked in blood and honor, when samurai walked the earth like gods among men. My name is Nikola Brown. I'm 32 years old, 6'1", and I've seen more sunrises in more centuries than most people see in a dozen lifetimes. I'm a chrononaut, a traveler through the folds of time itself, investigating anomalies that threaten to tear apart the fabric of history. And right now my chronofiber gear was picking up something that shouldn't exist. A temporal signature so powerful, it had pulled me across 3,000 miles in 800 years like a fish on a hook. The garden around me was breathtaking. Cherry blossoms drifted through the air like pink snow, settling on moss-covered stones in the surface of a koi pond that reflected the late afternoon sky. Beyond the garden walls I could hear the distant sounds of the city. Horses, voices raised in commerce and conversation, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. But here, in this sanctuary of silence and beauty, there was only peace, and her. She stood at the edge of the pond, her back to me, draped in layers of silk kimono the color of deep ocean water. Her hair was impossibly long, gathered in an elaborate style that spoke of nobility, adorned with ornamental pins that caught the light like stars. She was perfectly still, like a painting, like something too beautiful to be real. And then she turned. Our eyes met across the garden and the world seemed to stop. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with a face that could have been carved from porcelain. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her lips painted in the traditional style, her eyebrows delicate arches drawn high on her forehead. But it was her eyes that held me, dark as night, deep as eternity, and filled with something I couldn't name. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. As though she had been waiting for me her entire life, she moved toward me with small, precise steps, her kimono whispering against the stones. When she spoke, her voice was soft as silk, but it carried clearly in the still air. You are not from this place. I can see it in the way you stand, in the strangeness of your clothing, in the metal device upon your wrist that glows with captured starlight. Are you a spirit? A messenger from the gods? Or something else entirely? My neural translator worked overtime, feeding me not just the words but the layers of meaning beneath them. The formal register she used, the poetic phrasing that indicated education and refinement, the slight tremor that suggested fear beneath the composure. My name is Nikola Brown, I said, bowing slightly in what I hoped was the appropriate manner. I'm a traveler, but not the kind you're imagining. I come from a time very far from this one. And I'm here because something is wrong. Something connected to this temple, to this moment in history, to you. She studied me for a long moment, her face unreadable behind its mask of white powder and careful composure. Then she gestured toward a small pavilion at the far end of the garden. Come, if we are to speak of impossible things, we should do so away from curious eyes. I am Tomoe. I serve as priestess to this temple, though I was not always devoted to the gods. Once, I lived a different life, a life of steel and blood and honor. But that was before I understood the true nature of sacrifice. We walked together through the garden, and with every step, I felt the weight of her presence like gravity. There was something about her that pulled at me, something that made my analytical mind go quiet and my heart beat faster. It had been so long since I'd felt anything like this. Too long. The life of a chrononaut was lonely by necessity. We moved through time like ghosts, never staying, never connecting, never allowing ourselves to care too deeply about the people we met, because we knew we would leave them behind. But this woman, this Tomoe, made me want to break every rule I'd ever learned. The pavilion was small and intimate, open on all sides to the garden. We sat across from each other on woven mats, and she poured tea with movements so graceful they seemed like a form of prayer. The scent of green tea filled the space between us, mixing with the cherry blossoms and the incense that drifted from the main temple building. "Tell me," she said quietly, "what brings a man from beyond time to my garden on this particular day?" I activated the chrono module, projecting a soft hologram into the air between us. Tomoe gasped but didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes wide with wonder as colored lights danced across her face. The hologram showed temporal energy readings, probability matrices, cause and effect chains branching like lightning across a dark sky. "This is time itself," I explained, "the flow of history mapped and measured. And this," I highlighted a pulsing red anomaly, "is a disturbance centered on this temple. On you. In exactly 3 hours, at sunset, something is going to happen that will create a paradox powerful enough to collapse this entire timeline. Thousands of people will cease to exist. Entire futures will be erased. And according to my readings, you're at the center of it all." Tomoe's hand moved to her throat, touching a small jade pendant that hung there. "3 hours," she whispered. "That is when I am to perform the ritual. The rite of eternal separation. It is a ceremony performed only when a priestess chooses to sever all ties to her former life, to burn away her past and be reborn in service to the divine. I was a warrior once, you see. I fought alongside my husband in the Great War. I killed men with my own hands. I tasted glory and loss in equal measure. And then my husband fell in battle, and I came here seeking peace, seeking forgiveness, seeking a way to live with what I had done. And this ritual," I said carefully, "what does it require?" She looked away, out at the garden where the light was beginning to fade toward evening. "It requires the burning of all earthly attachments, letters, weapons, anything that ties me to who I was. And it requires a vow spoken at the moment of sunset that I will never again take up arms, never again love a mortal man, never again live as anything but a servant of the gods. Once spoken, the vow cannot be broken. I will be bound to this temple for the rest of my days." I ran the calculations again, cross-referencing historical records with temporal mechanics, and suddenly, I understood. The vow itself is the problem. Not because it's wrong, but because you don't want to make it. Part of you is still tied to your old life, still tied to your husband's memory, still tied to the warrior you used to be. And that conflict, that internal paradox between who you were and who you're trying to become, it's creating a temporal resonance. When you speak the vow at sunset, the contradiction will tear a hole in reality itself. Tomoe's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Then what do I do? If I perform the ritual, I destroy everything. But if I don't, I dishonor my vow to the temple. I dishonor my husband's memory, I dishonor myself. You have to make a choice," I said gently. "A real choice, not one forced on you by grief or duty or other people's expectations. You have to decide who you actually are and who you want to be. Because right now you're trying to be someone you're not, and the universe itself is rejecting that lie." She was quiet for a long time. The tea grew cold between us. The light continued to fade, and then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I first saw you standing in the garden, I felt something I have not felt since my husband died. A stirring in my heart, a warmth, a connection. Is that not strange? You are a stranger from an impossible place, and yet I feel as though I have known you forever. As though you came here not just to save the world, but to save me from myself." My heart was pounding. Every instinct I had as a Crononaut screamed at me to maintain professional distance, to remember my training, to not get involved. But looking at her, at the vulnerability in her eyes, at the courage it took to speak those words, I couldn't help myself. "I feel it too," I admitted. "And that terrifies me, because I can't stay here, Tomoe. Even if I wanted to, even if we both wanted it, I don't belong in this time. I have to go back. And you have a life here, a purpose, a future I do not want," she said fiercely. And for the first time I saw the warrior she had been. Fire blazed in her eyes. Strength radiated from her like heat. "I came to this temple because I thought I wanted peace. I thought I wanted to forget. But you have shown me something in your strange lights and impossible words. You have shown me that running from who I am does not bring peace, it brings destruction. So I will make my choice. Not the choice they expect, not the choice that honors tradition, but the choice that honors truth. She stood, and I stood with her. We were close now, close enough that I could smell the cherry blossoms in her hair, close enough that I could see the pulse beating in her throat. What will you do? I asked. I will go to the high priest, she said. I will tell him I cannot take the vow, that I am not meant to be a priestess, not in the way they demand, that I honor the gods by being true to myself, not by living a lie. And then, she hesitated, reaching out to touch my hand where it rested on the chrono module. Her fingers were soft and warm against my skin. And then I will leave this place. I will find a new path. Perhaps I will become a healer. Perhaps I will teach the arts of strategy and honor to young warriors. Perhaps I will simply live, and let that be enough. But I will not burn away who I am to please others. I wanted to kiss her. God help me, I wanted to pull her close and damn the consequences and pretend that we could have something real, something lasting. But I had seen too much, lived too long to believe in fairy tales. That will save the timeline, I said, my voice rough. If you make that choice from a place of truth, the paradox collapses. The anomaly resolves itself. You get to live, and so does everyone else. And you? She asked softly. What becomes of you, Nikola Brown from beyond time? I go back to my own era. I file my report. I move on to the next anomaly, the next crisis, the next moment in history that needs saving. Alone? The word hung between us like a blade. I nodded slowly. Alone. It's the price of what I do. The price of being a Crononaut. We don't get to stay. We don't get to build lives with the people we meet. We're ghosts, moving through history, touching lives but never truly living in them. Tomoe lifted her hand to my face, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw with infinite gentleness. Then let me give you something to carry with you. Something to remember that even ghosts can be touched, can be seen, can be loved. If only for a moment. She kissed me. Soft and fierce and desperate and tender all at once. It tasted like green tea and cherry blossoms and tears. It felt like coming home and saying goodbye in the same breath. And for that one perfect moment, time itself seemed to pause, granting us a space outside of cause and effect, outside of duty and destiny, outside of everything except the truth of what we felt. When we finally pulled apart, the sun was touching the horizon. Golden light flooded the garden, painting everything in shades of amber and fire. Tomoe straightened her kimono, her composure returning like armor sliding into place. I must go speak with the high priest before the ritual hour arrives, she said. Will you be here when I return? I looked at the chrono module. The anomaly was already beginning to stabilize, responding to her decision, her clarity of purpose. In another hour it would be completely resolved. My mission would be complete, and there would be no reason to stay. No, I said honestly. I'll be gone. But that doesn't mean I'll forget you. That doesn't mean this moment, this connection doesn't matter. It means everything. It means more than you know. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then let me say this while I still can. Thank you, Nikola Brown. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for giving me the courage to see myself. And thank you for showing me that love, even impossible love, even love that lasts only as long as a sunset, is still worth feeling, still worth choosing, still worth the pain that comes after. She bowed deeply, formally, and then turned and walked away across the garden. I watched her go, memorizing every detail. The way her kimono caught the light, the precise placement of each step, the straight line of her back, proud and unbroken despite everything. The bells began to ring again, calling the priest to evening prayer. I activated the chrono module, setting the coordinates for home. The device hummed to life, wrapping me in chronofibers, preparing to pull me out of this moment and back into my own time. But before I jumped, I heard her voice, distant but clear, carrying across the garden on the evening breeze. Do not forget me, ghost from the future. Do not forget that you were real to me, even if I am only a memory to you. I closed my eyes, feeling tears I didn't know I was capable of anymore. I won't forget, I whispered. I promise. The world dissolved into light and sensation. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously. Colors bled into sounds. Gravity became optional. And then I was home, standing in the sterile white chamber of the Temporal Research Institute, breathing hard, my heart racing, my mind still half in a garden full of cherry blossoms and impossible choices. Director Chen was waiting, clipboard in hand, professional concern on her face. Brown, you're back. Status report? I looked at the chrono module. All readings were normal. The anomaly had been resolved. The timeline was stable. Another successful mission. Another crisis averted. Another ghost story added to my collection of might-have-beens. Mission accomplished, I said flatly. The temporal paradox in 1185 Kyoto has been neutralized. No casualties. No permanent damage to the timeline. Everything is exactly as it should be. Chen nodded, making notes. Good work. Debrief in 30 minutes. And Brown? She looked up. Something almost like sympathy in her eyes. You look exhausted. Take the rest of the day. That's an order. I walked to my quarters, stripped off my brown coat, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They were still shaking. I could still feel the ghost of Tomoe's touch on my skin. Could still taste cherry blossoms and green tea. Could still hear her voice asking me not to forget. As if I ever could. As if any of this was forgettable. As if I hadn't just left the most beautiful, brave, honest woman I'd ever met, standing in a garden 800 years in the past, choosing truth over comfort, choosing life over safety, choosing herself over everyone's expectations. I pulled up my personal logs, the private files where I kept notes on the missions that mattered, the people who changed me, the moments that reminded me why I did this impossible, lonely work. And I wrote. Her name was Tomoe. She was a warrior who became a priestess who became herself. She saw me, really saw me, in a way no one has in years. And for one perfect afternoon in a garden full of cherry blossoms, I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a Crononaut. I was just a man, capable of love, capable of pain, capable of being human. I will carry that with me. I will hold it like a flame in the darkness, because she was right. Even impossible love matters. Even love that lasts only as long as a sunset is worth the price. And I was there. I was real. I was seen. And that has to be enough. I closed the file and lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on me. Tomorrow there would be another mission, another time, another crisis, another person I would meet and help and leave behind. That was the job. That was the life I'd chosen. But tonight, just for tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for what could never be, for the woman I would never see again, for the life we could never share, for the impossible love that bloomed and died in the space between heartbeats. The chrono module on my wrist pulsed softly, a reminder that somewhere, someone, Tomoe was living her life. She had left the temple, just as she said she would. Historical records showed that a woman matching her description had appeared in a village 50 miles away, offering her services as a healer and strategist. She had lived a long life, respected and remembered, true to herself until the very end. She had been happy, or as happy as anyone could be in those brutal times. And that had to be enough. That had to matter. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness behind my eyelids I saw her face. Pale as moonlight, strong as steel, beautiful beyond measure. And I heard her voice, soft and clear, speaking words that would echo through every timeline I visited, every mission I completed, every lonely night I spent wondering if any of this made a difference. Do not forget me, ghost from the future. I wouldn't. I couldn't, because she had given me something more valuable than gratitude or admiration or even love. She had given me proof that despite everything, despite the loneliness and the sacrifice and the impossibility of it all, connection was still possible. Being seen was still possible. Being human was still possible. Even for a ghost. even for a chrononaut. Even for me. 3 days later I received a new assignment. Temporal anomaly detected in 1890s London, high priority. Potential catastrophic cascade. Report immediately for briefing and deployment. I strapped on my brown coat, checked my chronofiber gear, calibrated the chrono module, and prepared to jump. This was my life. This was my purpose. Saving history, one impossible moment at a time. And somewhere, in a garden I would never see again, in a time I could never return to, a woman who had once been a warrior and then a priestess and finally herself was living proof that the choices we make matter. That truth matters. That love, even impossible love, even love that lasts only as long as a sunset, changes everything. I activated the jump sequence. The world dissolved. Time opened up before me like a flower blooming in reverse. And I stepped forward into the unknown, carrying her with me. Carrying that afternoon of cherry blossoms and green tea and a kiss that tasted like goodbye. Carrying the knowledge that somewhere, somewhen, I had been real. I had been seen. I had mattered. And that was worth every price I paid, every sacrifice I made, every lonely night I endured. Because she had shown me the truth. Even ghosts can love. Even chrononauts can be touched. Even impossible things can happen, if only for a moment. And sometimes, a moment is all you need to remember what it means to be alive.